Welcome to this amazing class called Exploring Crystal Skull. My name is Joshua Shapiro. I'm a crystal skull explorer, and I will be assisted by my wife, Katrina, who is in spirit. She passed away in November, but she's been helping me through the courses I've been doing here in the Florida area and my private sessions as well. This presentation you're about to see is the same presentation that I gave at the Unification Conference near Chicago in September of 2019. So I just wanted to acknowledge Katrina in spirit because she will be assisting me. I'll be hearing her, or I hear her when she talks to me. I feel her. By the way, the crystal skull that I'm holding in my hand is one of our personal skulls. It's called Portal de Luz, Portal of Light. It was created by a Brazilian carver, and I received it in 1999. So you can see here, even though you're going to see a lot of pictures of crystal skulls in this presentation, that I'm actually holding a real one. I have a few other ones that I may spontaneously bring up to share with you that are much different than this one. Okay, I'm going to put him down now. So first of all, who are the Crystal Skull Explorers? Well, I want you to know I chose that name because I was trying to think of a way to express what am I doing? So I'm exploring the crystal skull. So naturally, I became an explorer. But really, the first day of my exploration of the crystal skulls began in 1983. So since that moment in 1983, I've written various books. I've given many lectures all over the world. I've been involved in various kinds of research, documentaries, and I've helped to organize conferences. So any way that I can share information with crystal skulls, I've been involved. I am truly a typical Aries. If there's a new way to do it, I'm going to be involved in it. Now, Katrina, who was my partner from 2008, she received her first crystal skull as a gift from a friend right before we actually met in the Atlanta area. She already had a very strong affinity for a gemstone. So for her to become involved with crystal skulls, it made perfect sense. And then eventually, where I moved to Atlanta, and then I did a reading for Katrina with the crystal skulls in March, and that's when our relationship began. But I actually met a friend of hers who bought a copy of my first book, Mystery of the Crystal Skulls Revealed, and Katrina read it in one day. So we were already meant to meet, and she has had a great impact upon my work with the crystal skulls, which is why I also want to honor her in this presentation. What I want to do is give you a definition about what a crystal skull is, and then talk about what types of crystal skulls actually exist in the world, or the ones that I've come across, because I've seen 4 types. So as the term crystal skulls represents, we're talking about some type of a skull-shaped image that's made from different type of gemstones. Some of them may be human-like, some of them could be animal-like, ET-like, stylized. You're going to see all kinds of skulls, but basically we're talking about a skull-shaped image that's made from a variety of gemstones. Now, there are 4 different types that are known in the world today. The first one is called ancient or very old, and I'm going to be showing you examples of each type of these different skulls throughout this class. I define an ancient or very old skull as one that was made at least 2,000 years ago or further. Now, I need to let you know that we do not really have a scientific method that can date exactly when a crystal skull was carved, although we have some spiritual or paranormal ways to do so, which I will talk about in a little bit. The second category of crystal skulls are called old crystal skulls. These would be ones made from 100 years ago to about 2000. So they're kind of fashioned or crafted, whereas the ancient or very old skull, we really don't know exactly what techniques did they use to make them because they're extremely accurate. Continuing on with the other types of crystal skulls that exist, and by the way, you see one of our crystal skulls there on the screen called Rosalita, which is a human-sized rose quartz crystal skull of 2 pieces. The lower jaw is separate. So this actually is an example of the next classification of skulls that I'm going to be sharing with you, which are called contemporary new crystal skulls. These are ones that are being made by the modern carvers today, who, if they're using quartz crystal in particular, they need diamond tip tools to be able to make them because quartz is a very hard substance. So these are skulls that have been made within the last 100 years. Now we have one last category which is extremely rare. It's called an apported crystal skull. An apportation is defined as an object that just appears in our reality, seemingly coming from nowhere. So the apported crystal skull, which actually Katrina and I received, was when we were living in Seattle, Washington. There was a spiritual medium who had a number of objects like jewelry and gemstones that literally fell from his mouth, like 40 or 50 of them. And there was one crystal skull in particular. So I will be showing you later on in this presentation an example of this skull that we actually received, which was apported. Now, as I mentioned already, there's all kinds of shapes and forms that the crystal skulls come in, human-like, alien, animal, stylized, which would refer to ones that I'm going to show you called Tibetan, Mongolian, or Himalayan, which are definitely old skulls. And there also are hollow skulls that I've seen, which carvers have told me would be extremely difficult to be able to carve them without them shattering on them. So again, there may have been a very old technique to make these hollow skulls. And there also is jade skulls I've seen with a jade skeleton. And the jade skulls and skeletons seem to have a different energy connected to them than the other type of crystal skull. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is just give you a brief history about the crystal skulls. But before I do, I feel inspired again to show you a different type of skull, this dragon skull. This is an example of an animal type skull, which people are making. This is made out of atlantisite, which is a very rare material. So this is another type of skull modern carvers are making, along with the one I was holding, Portal de Luz, which also is a modern skull. Okay, so the history I'm going to share with you here, I call it a modern history because it's relatively recently. Because there's no way to use carbon-14 dating or some scientific method to date crystal skulls, we can only speculate. There's like theories and legends about what happened with the crystal skulls prior to the mid-1800s. So I'm just going to tell you what we know exactly for this history. So really in the 1860s, the first crystal skulls started to come out publicly. So there was one that went into a museum in Mexico City. There was another one that eventually went into a museum in London, the British Museum. There was another one that went into the Trocadero Museum of Paris. These were like in the late 1890s. And in the 1860s, there was another crystal skull that actually had a hole all the way cut through it with a cross associated with it, with I think a date carved in the cross of about 15 or 1600. So these different skulls that I'm mentioning all came out like in the 1860s, and most of them eventually went into modern museums before the beginning of the 20th century. Then after the 20th century, we had other crystal skulls that started to come out of Mexico and Central America. Like, for example, the one that you're looking at here is called the Mitchell Hedges crystal skull. There's another one that's known today called Max, and another one called ET. These three skulls came out in basically the early 1900s, 1920s. Then in the 1970s, we started to have books and TV shows that started to appear. So, for example, Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World came out, and they actually had in the beginning of the show, the introduction, a picture of the Mitchell Hedges skull, and they also had an episode where the Mitchell Hedges skull was brought together with the skull in the British Museum. The first book came out in the 1970s, written by Richard Garvin, called The Crystal Skulls, which also talked about the Mitchell Hedges skull, the British, and the Paris crystal skull. Then in the mid-1990s, people started to wanting to buy crystal skulls. So carvers started to create them. So these, what we call modern or contemporary skulls, started to come out, and now we have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of them available for people. Also in the 1990s, they started to come out with other books, such as the book that I did with Nasserino and Bone, Mystery of the Crystal Skulls Revealed. And today, where we are right now and beyond, there are so many crystal skulls coming out, it's impossible to keep up. That's both modern skulls and also crystal skulls that are being found like near ancient ruins, or there are families that have been holding these skulls for hundreds of years.